Hey there! You probably wonder where we've been all this time. Aside from some real life stuff, we have been hard at work on Project Crucible. First off, we would like to thank you guys for the incredible support on the last video. Seeing the reception and feedback really motivated us to keep working hard and make the game the best it can be.
For those who don't know, Project Crucible is a survival horror game set in a gas trench. You need to maintain your diminishing gas mask filter, clear your way through the trench with dynamite, and scavenge the trench for resources which will have a random chance of spawning.
The game is focused on immersion and features no heads-up display, with all the information presented to the player, such as the diegetic inventory. We have been hard at work behind closed doors, and we have a lot to talk about. If you've watched our previous devlogs, you might have noticed how the trench has drastically evolved over time. I spent a lot of time looking at references of World War I trenches, and I've had a hard time settling on one particular aesthetic. After many reiterations, I feel like I'm satisfied with the current look of the trenches. For some extra detail, I took the mud texture and added footprints to allude that soldiers inhabited these trenches and moved around. And on top of them, I've created several pieces of duck boards that I've laid out across the level. We also made a hanging cloth plane that we added physics to, so it reacts when the player walks through it. Nice.
Let's get this out onto a track.
I used to make textures for every model separately. This wasn't the best idea since we are in a trench setting with multiple repeating assets, and this would be terrible for performance. That's where trim sheets come in. If you don't know what a trim sheet is, it's combining multiple textures on the same texture map. This allows for quick mapping of textures on multiple assets in the scene, which makes my job a lot easier and makes performance better. They take some time and planning to make, but it was oddly relaxing putting it together. If you're making a game with repeating objects, get them.
That bollocks.
With the trench overhaul completed, it was time to expand the level by adding new places to explore. That's where dugouts come in.
Soldiers didn't just fight in the trenches, they lived in them. They had sentry duty, were assigned specific roles, took cat naps while artillery was dropped on their heads. It's a common misconception on how boring life in a trench really was. It wasn't just constant fighting. A lot of soldiers were battling boredom by drinking, playing cards, or hunting the dog-sized rats that inhabited their dugouts.
When designing dugouts, I tried to keep all of these details in mind in order to make these spaces feel lived in. I've created multiple assets like tables, chairs, cans of food, as well as photos that hang on walls. Dugouts made the exploration even more engaging and allowed us to ground the player into the setting. There was still one problem: they didn't have any loot containers.
What is a survival horror game without drawers to open and closets to search? We've created multiple drawers and lockers that the player can open and search for items. We then placed our item spawns and attached the transform to the specific drawer where we want the item to spawn, so that when the player opened it, the item would stay in it instead of staying in place. We love games where you can search different objects for loot, and this allows us to hide some items out of the player's view. Speaking of...
We've received multiple feedbacks about the chosen art style for our game, and some of you expressed concern that the visibility of items can be hard because of it. While we don't want to double back on the chosen art style for our game, we were thinking of in-game alternatives to solve this issue. We already have a diegetic inventory system, so we started brainstorming ideas for an item that would allow the player to find items easier for a short period of time. So, we came up with the syringe. While playing Resident Evil 7, I was reminded of how well that game hid some of its resources. A lot of them were easy to find, but the devs hid a lot of resources out of sight which you could find on your own if you were attentive enough, or had to use an item called a psychostimulants. Psychostimulants granted the player X-ray vision for a short amount of time, allowing them to find some items they otherwise wouldn't find. This item was really useful when the player was in a pinch, and it's one of my favorite items across any survival horror game. So, naturally we were gonna copy paste it into our game.
Just like in Resident Evil 7, the syringe is a very limited item that allows the player to see through walls at a significant distance. This was accomplished using a free asset called Quick Outline. When in range of highlightable objects, they will highlight and give off particles so the player can find the item better. It doesn't last a long time, so the player needs to decide when it is best used. Now that the player is able to see through objects, this allows us to tuck some items away in corners the player probably wouldn't look at. We believe this is a good way to implement feedback while also expanding the gameplay and retaining our vision, but we will keep working on making items stand out more in the environment.
Hello guys, it's me Potato Milk. I'm the Viewmodel Chud animator of Project Crucible. I remember I joined this project when the previous devlog dropped, and as soon as I saw the old Viewmodel Animations, straight up wrote a 400 long Karen comment saying, I could do better, and the rest is history. How beautiful. What I was looking to change in these animations was try to add more character and overall polish to them, without overdoing it and accidentally making another Modern Warfare 2019. The PSX style is really weird, and honestly I didn't know if I wanted to go with the Gloomwood's overly curved movement, or just the very smooth and sometimes even clunky structure of Cry Fierce's weapon animations, and I went with the latter, since they sort of fit the style of what we're doing here. What's funny is that I had an entire other set of animations for the pistol, and they looked extremely similar to Cry Fierce, so much so that they were a little too smooth for the game, so they're scrapped. So I involuntarily tried again, and came up with this. Definitely tried to mirror the style we were going with. I've also reanimated most of the utility they use around the game, including the backpack, dynamite, don't forget the lighter, changing the filter of the gas mask, and the syringe that the gang just talked about. Pretty much everything. Another thing that I wanted to talk about was how the shotgun had probably the most changes to the shooting and reloading out of any other weapon. The only other weapon there. Since it was always a little too underpowered, or just too broken, so we try to get that to feel as best as possible. Like, you know, you're shooting something huge. What?
We want the game to feel unpredictable in a way that even when you're stocked up on items, you can't be ready for everything. Even your weapons aren't as reliable as you initially thought, because we added weapon jams.
For the team, boys! My gunshot! My gunshot!
Weapon jams occur on a very small % chance when you are firing your weapon. There's no weapon condition in the game, although we were brainstorming some ideas about having an item allowing the player to clean their guns and decrease the chances of the jams happening. While the jamming chances are low, they add a lot of tension if your guns jam at a very inopportune time. It is a tight rope to walk, as we want it to be a thought in the back of the player's head while also happening when they least expect it. In order for the player to clear the jam, all they have to do is press the unjam key, which the player can rebind as they see fit.
It is also a tricky mechanic to balance because we want it to feel like it is in the game while also not letting it happen too often, because then it becomes a nuisance for the player. Since our game is focused on a no heads-up display approach, the player will be notified that a gun is jammed with a sound effect, which we're still working on. Speaking of no heads-up display, the only way the player knew how many bullets they had was by tracking it in their head and checking their inventory bag. FPS games usually have a little ammo counter on the corner of the screen, but that would kill the immersion of our game, so we opted for a different approach. We added an ammo inspect option for the player where they can pull out the magazine and physically see how many bullets are in the magazine. The trench gun inspects allow you to see if a shell is chambered or not. Being able to track the ammo count in a diegetic way and enabling weapon jams were both good additions when it came to keeping the player informed but also unprepared at the same time. However, there's one thing you can't predict. Rain was something we wanted to implement a long time ago, but we didn't just want it to be a cool visual effect. We wanted to be able to tie it to gameplay and exploration in a way where you dreaded it.
What we did was tie the rain prefab to the player, so we will follow the player and increase and decrease the intensity at random intervals. Basically, the rain has a % chance of spawning within a certain time limit, and this % chance increases the more time passes. This allows us to simulate the rain in a more realistic way while also making it unpredictable. The rain intensity gradually increases once it starts, and we tied the fog intensity to a script, so the heavier the rain gets, the denser the fog gets, making it harder for the player to navigate and see incoming threats. Weapon jams are more likely to occur during rain as well, really giving the player a sense of dread once it starts raining.
Doors and keys are the yin yang of survival horror games. You can't have one without the other. Back in the early days of Resident Evil, they were used as eerie transitioning screens, but also as progression blockers, something that has persisted throughout the genre. Doors require certain keys in order to progress through the game. I always loved the way Resident Evil did their doors and keys. Usually you would find a unique looking door with a clear motif, and then you would have to explore the rest of the level to find a key with the same theme. I don't know why my lizard gamer brain loves this stuff so much, but I set out to do the same with our game.
First off, we needed to decide a way to make keys appear in the inventory. So we created a little keychain attachment that sits inside the inventory. Once you pick up key, the key spawns inside the keychain.
I tried to create doors and keys with a similar theme so that the player can easily tell where the key belongs. Keys will be used to access areas that progress the story, as well as some optional areas. But what if the door doesn't have a key?
Let me in. Let me in.
The player will encounter many doors in the trench, some requiring different methods in order to be opened. Some doors will have a padlock on the outside that the player can shoot in order to open it, while other doors will be barred from the inside and require the player to approach them from a different side. Wooden doors can be opened in other ways too, but we leave that choice up to the player. We also created steel doors that can't be blown up or shot through, so the player will need to approach them in a different way.
Doors allowed us to explore different options of tackling a problem, which is a key component of our game. See what I did there? We want the game to have elements of the immersive sim genre, and doors are the first step towards that. Player decisions play a crucial part in the experience. We want to keep creating different options to solve problems so that each player can play their way. You don't need monsters to make war scary. When approaching the design for our enemies, I had to keep in mind the setting the game takes place in. Many surviving recounts of the First World War describe a muddy hellscape littered with corpses and blood. Since we are approaching the war setting from a fantastical angle, I had to make sure the designs were grounded in their setting while also having room for creative flourish. I've looked at works of Otto Dix, a German painter and printmaker who served in World War I, who then portrayed the horrors of war through his work. You might be familiar with his stormtroopers advancing under gas, which was an inspiration for the game. His work exhibits war as an all-consuming, shapeless evil that swallows everything in its wake. The sheer hopelessness felt through the landscapes and the subjects of his paintings and print inspired a motto that I've adhered to when designing the enemies: mud, blood, and wire.
Wire.
The designs of Masahiro Ito and Ikumi Nakamura from Silent Hill and The Evil Within fame respectively also influenced a lot of the designs. We took a step back and looked at our enemies and decided we needed a change. We initially took free soldier assets from the asset store and tweaked them to fit our style, but we knew we needed original designs in order for the game to have its own identity. The problem is, none of us are concept artists nor character modelers. I've had some experience with drawing, so I dusted off the old sketchbook and sketched some new designs. I think I did alright. That was good and all, but I still wasn't familiar with modeling characters. This is when we found a great 3D character artist by the name of Hobu. They joined the team momentarily to work on some of the enemy designs, but ultimately had to leave, which is unfortunate because they hit it out of the park with their character models.
So far the game has 3 enemies: the rat, the soldier, and the raider, who all behave in a different way and pose a different challenge.
Rats were very common in the trenches during World War I, and a lot of surviving documents describe them as big as dogs. They would feed on corpses, rations, and were oftentimes hunted by soldiers in their downtime. Rats are a small and nimble enemy that becomes increasingly harder to deal with in numbers. They are small and hard to hit, and quickly overwhelm the player. They're also pretty fun to blast with a shotgun.
Soldiers are the most common enemy in the trench. Twisted representation of their former selves, they haunt the trenches on the lookout for the player. If we had to compare them to any enemy in the survival horror genre, it would be the regular zombie enemy in the Resident Evil remake. They can put up a beating and require several bullets to be put down. Like in every survival horror game, the player must decide which enemy is worth the resources to deal with. Rats and soldiers do not get along, and currently the rats can easily overwhelm a soldier. The game is perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
Raiders are the newest additions and act as a brute enemy. They're slow moving, hard hitting, and are really tough to get by in a tight trench corridor. Their design was inspired by their real life counterparts, soldiers donning armors and masks raiding enemy trenches with melee weapons. The Raider is by far the most formidable opponent in the trench, and his design is one of the most proud of, and Hobu did exceptional work taking my sketches and bringing them to life. There will be more enemy types coming down the line.
While Hobu is unfortunately no longer with the team, his exceptional work can be found on his Fiverr page. Make sure to check him out for any of your low poly character needs. Link is in the description.
Good sound design can elevate a horror game from a mediocre experience to an unforgettable one. Suffice to say, none of us are sound designers. Most of the sounds of the game come from splicing and mixing different audio we find in free sound libraries, and sometimes it works out, and sometimes
Keelan joined the team and was given a tall task: redesign all the pre-existing sound effects as well as create background music for the game. You have been hearing one of the atmospheric tracks that he made in the background, which really took the scene to a whole new level. We were brainstorming different influences across the survival horror genre, and it's very hard not paying attention to the legendary work of Akira Yamaoka. His influential work on the Silent Hill games is far-reaching, so naturally it served as groundwork for Keelan's tracks. We tried not to borrow too much from Yamaoka's work in order for the game to have its own voice, so we looked at other influences such as the Stalker franchise, which has some really good atmospheric tracks. Can't forget of all those random screams and abstract sounds in the zone too.
What is that?
Keelan had to lead the team, unfortunately, but his tracks gave us an idea of what the game could sound like and really just made playtesting the level and exploring it so much more engaging.
If you're interested in Keelan's great work, we'll leave a link to his Bandcamp page in the description.
Remember when we said this game will have immersive sim elements? Well, it's time we address one of those, a simple ladder. While exploring the trench, the player may come across ladders. These ladders are not just set pieces, but provide the player with unique opportunities to navigate around. Instead of trudging around on the ground, the player can take their chances going over the top in no man's land, and hope they don't get their head popped off by some sniper in the distance. The player may find another path to their destination, or a shortcut to the death if they aren't careful enough. With the introduction of the ladder, this presented us with a whole new issue: the player's eagerness to explore outside the trench. The game already has death boundaries that keep the player confined in the designated play area, but we didn't want to limit the player's movement possibilities. We wanted to keep the core gameplay inside the trenches and offer the player different ways to circumvent obstacles if they so choose. The goal is to try to reward the observant and brave player who decides they want to try their luck over the top.
Ladders can potentially help out with another problem: soft locking. One of the most important items in the game is dynamite, which is used to blow up debris that blocks your path in the trench, and now doors as well. Since the percent chance of dynamite is varied across the level, what if the player finds themselves stuck without the possibility to move forward? It's a tough balance to strike. There are fixed dynamite spawns, but if the player can't find any dynamite while exploring, it can lead to a lot of frustration if they can't move forward. On the flip side, we don't want to place ladders everywhere so that the dynamite becomes obsolete. We aim to make dynamite an invaluable tool to deal with problems you are presented with, but also provide an alternative solution if you don't have the means to deal with the problem at hand. Notes in survival horror games are used to give the player directions, context, as well as paint the world that they inhabit. In our game, the notes will serve another purpose: gameplay. Typically, when you replay a survival horror game, you can memorize all the answers and codes to previous puzzles and doors, which can take away some of the enjoyment and replayability. Amnesia the Bunker solved this issue by randomizing the codes you find on notes and dog tags. That way the player can't brute force the answer. Well, they can, but they're gonna be there for a very long time, and you can't really do that in a game where your air supply is constantly diminishing.
We created a script that allows a note to randomly generate a set amount of numbers and then tie that note to a specific padlock. This in turn allows us to spread these notes around the level, rewarding exploration with codes to lockers that might hide some valuable resources behind them.
Some of these notes will be required to access certain areas, while others are there for the player to interact with if they want to. Randomizing codes is a good way of enforcing notes and padlocks as something that needs to be solved instead of breezed through, and it adds a little bit to replayability. Game development is a marathon and not a sprint. It's easy to think of cool mechanics on paper, but implementation is a back and forth process. You introduce some new shiny feature only to break other ones. A lot of cool ideas come and go, but it's important to maintain a realistic scope and expectations for not what we want to do, but what we are able to do.
There's a lot of features that we want to implement, but it's important to take a step back and realize what we were able to accomplish with the time given and our skill set. Scope management is the bane of many projects, and our game is seeing many changes behind the scenes, and for the better. That said, what's next?
Given some small setbacks, we are focusing on polishing mechanics, adding UI, and starting to work on narrative structure for the game. The goal is to officially announce the game along with the Steam page and demo. It's also important to realize we're a small team and that this project is our first commercial game, so we want to set expectations early, but also not let that stop us from pushing out creative ideas and a fun game.
Thank you guys again for the incredible support and taking time out of your day to watch our devlogs. We put our heart and soul into this project, and if you would like to keep up to date with future announcements, make sure to subscribe and join our Discord. We have a great community that likes to talk about games, history, and other media, and we post some behind the scenes development progress there. so make sure to join. The link is in the description below. Lots of great things on the way, and we will see you in the next devlog.
What are you buying?